Did I hear extra tax? Man, this is amazing to see you all out here today. You know, the one good thing about this carbon tax is that it's got us off our backsides and said enough is enough. It's got the people of Australia up in arms to say, we want the nation back. Now, I'm not emceeing today. We're waiting for Jacques and some MCs. But in the meantime, we're going to proclaim we won't be beaten. We won't be silenced. We won't be put down. We won't be lied to. We won't be dominated. This is a democracy, not a tyranny. So what do I hear? Axe the tax. I'm going to play the song again. The main reason being, I'm the truck driver. This is my truck. I'm not the MC, but I'm filling in for the moment. So I want one more time, if you would just tell me, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want to axe? Axe the tax. Welcome. They said we wouldn't last after the first Canberra rally. Remember, we were the people of no consequence. Before we begin the program, we'd just like to give a special thank you for the police. And did you notice our leading banner, which stated, business says what? Smash the carbon tax. Now, our format in today's program is going to be a little bit different. Usually we've gone first up with our politicians, but this time, first up, we're going to hear from a couple of business people. All right? Instead of waiting for them at the end of the program, we want to hear from them first, because basically, this is the threat to our whole country, our business community, which flows on to you and me. Now, just remember this. When Julia makes deals with people to splash out a lot of money, big money, it's with those big multinationals. There's no compensation for small business, is there? No. What happens when they can't pay their rent? They can't pay their electricity. They close their doors. Where's the compensation for that? Jobs are gone. So, to kick off the program, we're going to listen to a person who has a small business in the Gladesville area of Sydney, an engineering business. He actually spoke at our first rally in Canberra last year, March the 23rd, and he's from Interpump Engineering Company there.
I must start by saying thank you very much for having organised all of this, Jacques. I don't know if any of you are aware, but Jacques has been lobbying against the misappropriation of funds by the government for a very long time, and it's not just misappropriation of funds. So Jacques, thanks mate, you're really carrying us through. It's great to see so many familiar faces here today. We've been lobbying against this for over a year now. Absolutely. And no, did they listen to us? She didn't listen to us because we never voted her in. Did she ever sit down with us and ask us what our concerns were? Why? She's very scared of the power that we have. And we need to keep this up and keep it strong so we can show what power we actually have. Our next call is Axe the Tax. Election now. Mostly low-income earners. That's right. for the increase in electricity costs? What about the increase of cost in everything else in this country? I don't hear about any other compensation. Now, why should we have to create a tax to charge the people and then compensate them?
It's not compensation, it's robbery.
Absolutely.
It's robbery. No tax, no compensation.
We've become the untouchables. We've become the dearest country in the world. I not only employ in Australia, but I trade globally. And one of the sales reps who was here last year turned around and he said, I travel the whole world. Japan was the dearest place in the world, and now it's Australia. He said to me, I just paid $5 for a coffee this morning. He said, I complain when I pay $1 for a good coffee. So now it doesn't just stop there, and it carries on continuously. So now we've become much too expensive to employ, much too expensive to manufacture, and much too expensive for anyone to travel to this country. So not only are we destroying you, not only are we destroying manufacturing, but we're also destroying tourism. Yes, it's a green country, but can we do anything? Absolutely unbelievable. The shame and the ruin of this place. It was a great country before Julia Gillard. Election now. Axe the tax. Absolutely. Now, I've followed CATA around for over a year now around the country, as I said, and once before I spoke about 6 degrees of separation. And by that I mean 6 degrees of separation in business. In one way, shape or form, I employ every single one of you as a small employer. In one way, shape or form, you employ me. Now, with this tax and an 18% increase in electricity alone this weekend, and I already have letters from almost all my suppliers saying that by this week, everything will go up, all my supplies will go up by a minimum of 8% to 18%. I will have to carry that on to every single one of you. And if you can't afford it, and if I can't afford to keep the doors closed, I'm very sorry, but that 6 degrees of separation means that we can never do business again. That leaves me one choice and one choice alone, and it's to take my manufacturing offshore. That's destruction of this country once again. Axe the tax. Election now. Thank you.
Thank you again, Jacques. I love your passion and your commitment to this. It's truly outstanding, and everybody from CATA, and thanks for your time, everybody. I am a small business owner, and it's extremely disappointing to see what it's become to now. You know, how difficult it's been over the last couple of years. Just for instance, electricity rising over 50% over the last couple of years has made it extremely difficult to continue and employ the amount of people we employ. What I find a real shame is a country like Australia that has got so much opportunity to be so independent from the rest of the world and really flourish has, you know, just got no hope the way it's been managed. And the country is a business, and it's got to be managed like one. And the mismanagement that we've seen over the last couple of years has been really disappointing, and, you know, hence the reason we're all here today. Yeah, thank you. Yes, I was just telling Jacques through the week, he said, look, come up and have a chat. I said, look, I'm not much of a public speaker. He said, look, just tell a couple of stories. And one was, we started a cafe for my sister over at Rouse Hill there. And the running costs of that has just, like they were talking about the $5 coffee, that's really the truth of it. It's at a point now where we're going to have to close it down. And it's so disappointing being a family thing and wanting the family involved. It's just extremely tough. And that's everybody you talk to in business. And I know a lot of people are feeling the same way. You'd think the government would say, look, come down, we'll have a chat, communicate, try and sort the problem out. They've just shut the door on us, and that's what's disappointing about it. So we do need an election, and thank you for your time.
6 days before the last election, Julia Gillard looked down the television camera and said, there will be no carbon tax by any government I lead. Well, why did she say that? She said it because Tony Abbott had been saying as soon as light night follows day. There will be a carbon tax if Julia Gillard is elected. So it is true to say that if she had not given that undertaking 6 days before the election, she would not be Prime Minister today. The fact of the matter is she was not elected. She has never been elected. She stitched up a deal after doing in Mr. Rudd, and stitched up another deal after we won the primary vote, and it was determined by the independents. It was the forming of an alliance with the Greens that no doubt brought about the introduction of the carbon tax as a price for their support. Now let me say, when Senator Brown was leading the Greens, I think he all wanted us to live in a cave with a candle. Now that we have Senator Mills, she'd like us to do without the candle. The fact of the matter is that we live in a civilized country which is dependent on electricity for everything we do. We're dependent on electricity for this microphone, for these cameras, for your getting here. Every aspect of our life is determined on having access to electricity. And we have had the benefit of the cheapest electricity in the world. Coal-fired power stations gives you the cheapest electricity in the world. That's why China buys so much from us, because they too want electricity for their people. And so this tax on electricity, because that's what it is, will in fact get into the nook and cranny of every aspect of your life. Everything we do will increase in cost. Now you've heard already from people who say how it will impact on small business. Julia Gillard says some people will be better off because of the compensation she's paying. But of course, if you look at the Treasury modelling, they will tell you that the cost of the damage that the tax is going to do to every family is $9.90. And she's going to make you better off by giving $10.10. And anybody who believes the Treasury can model that accurately will truly believe there are fairies at the bottom of the garden. The truth of the matter is Treasury gets it wrong every year. Whenever we get a budget, we have to renew it. We have to look at it again 6 months later to correct the errors and make the alterations, and we call them supplementary estimates. So when we look at the whole of the so-called modelling scenario of what the government is trying to force on us, we have given a commitment that we will abolish that tax. And we will abolish it. We will abolish it immediately. Tony Abbott said yesterday in Melbourne, when he says there will be no carbon tax by any government he leads, he says you can really trust him for it. And you can. It will be the first legislation that will be introduced. Now let's go back and let's look at the last election, the election 2007. In 2007, we virtually had a referendum on work choices. And we accepted when we lost that election, that the government had the right to abolish work choices. And accordingly, we didn't prevent that occurring. Equally, this election, this coming election, whenever it is held, now or in 12 months' time, whenever it is held, will be a referendum on the carbon tax. And that means that the Labour Party will either accept what the Australian people have said and allow the repealing bill to go through, or, if it won't, we will have a double dissolution. That means we put the bill in, and when it goes to the Senate, if it fails to pass the Senate, 3 months later we will reintroduce it and it will go back to the Senate, and if it fails to pass the second time, that is a trigger for a double dissolution. It is not anything that Parliament can enact, it can also repeal. The Parliament is sovereign to itself. Those people who say we we can't abolish it are wrong. We can. Now, there are many aspects in which this carbon tax is going to really make life difficult, particularly for senior Australians, people on fixed incomes, people who have no ability to see an increase in their income, but simply see an increase in the cost of their electricity and their gas, which in turn narrows disposable income, which indeed then impacts on every aspect of retail. And so many people seek employment in retail and jobs are lost. When we see a smelter closed down, it means that the electricity generators lose a big client. That means that there's pressure on for price increases as well to keep it going. And only the other day down in Melbourne, the Prime Minister gave hush money to another smelter to try and stop it closing down and sacking other people. At every aspect, people are losing their jobs, and the impact on people's families and people's lives is being one of punishment by a Prime Minister who just sees that she wants to stay in power and cares naught for the people. So at every turn we see that a Prime Minister is desperate just to remain in power, not to give and not to serve the people. It has become a very selfish government. It has become very selfish in everything it attempts to do. It will not in any way accept that it's gone the wrong course, whether it's stopping the boats that are coming or whether it's the carbon tax. We sat the other morning until 4:15 in the morning, waiting for that some bills to come back from the Senate. And at 3:30 in the morning, Mr. Wilkie said he would like to move our bill on the question of utilisation of Nauru, and at 3:50 I was on my feet speaking to that bill, but the government wouldn't give leave for it to be processed. This was an opportunity to put in place policy that would indeed begin to stop the boats and to stop the tragedies that result from that. But again and again, there is a Prime Minister who tries to say that we are the party of negativity, when it is they who are the party of negativity. Whether it's trying to table a document to prove that the carbon tax is going to impact on the livelihood and the welfare of families, whatever it is, the answer is no, you can't table that document. No, you can't put that case. No, we won't let you have leave for a censure motion. No, we won't let you have a suspension of standing orders. At every turn where there is an opportunity to discuss things in the Parliament, we get a no from the government. And so it is fascinating to know that the government who says that we have been running a scare campaign about the impact of the carbon tax, it is they who run the scare campaign, trying to frighten the nation into accepting the need for one, but the Australian people are saying no, they don't want it. So, you are united, as we are, in determining and being determined to see the end of this tax. Australia doesn't have too many international advantages, but the one where we do have an international advantage is in our ability to have cheap electricity. And that has enabled us to smelt aluminium, and indeed, right to this day, our single largest export of what is known as elaborately transformed manufactures is aluminium ingots. And yet this is being attacked by this government because of the increase in the cost of electricity. It is the one competitive advantage that we have in international trade. And so at every turn, as the government pressures the Australian people and pushes this horrendous tax on us, we are punishing businesses, we are punishing workers, and we are lowering their standard of living. And that, after all, is the aim of the tax. She wants us to have less. She wants us to use electricity less. She wants us to have a lower standard of living. That is the aim of the tax, to have less carbon emissions because we are generating less electricity. The truth of the matter is the tax will continue to rise every year, but as well as that, when the so-called big emitters, which went from a list of 1,000 to a list of 500 to a list of 200, now I see it's back to 400, that this, in fact, will not be able to, they won't meet those targets, and so under the legislation, they are required to pay money to third world countries to plant trees or to do other sorts of things, which amounts to $3.5 billion a year. That is $3.5 billion that would be invested not in this country, but somewhere else. So at every turn, when you look at aspects of this tax, you see that there are hidden aspects that people aren't even cognizant of. But the Australian people are good, sensible people. They know they don't want this tax. They don't want the people to be penalised. And that's why we have taken this fight right up to the government and will continue to do so, right through till we have that next election. I want to also demolish another argument that the Labor Party likes to use, and that concerns the GST. When John Hart said he would never ever have a GST and then changed his mind, he took it to the Australian people. It was voted upon. And the GST is a value-added tax. And we abolished the wholesale sales tax. But a value-added tax means that you pay the tax when the good or the service is first created, and then it is paid at every transaction until the final consumer, but the tax in between the creation and the final consumer is refunded at every level. With the carbon tax, it is a cascading and compounding tax. In other words, it will be paid by the so-called big polluters, but that tax will be passed on and on and on, and it will compound at every level. It is never refunded. It compounds so that you pay a tax on a tax on a tax on a tax. And that's what indeed is the punishing nature of this tax, which is designed specifically to make you have less. That is its aim. That is its aim. Now, if you look at what has already happened, you might remember you used to get a bill for your electricity and it had a little square down the bottom and it said, tick here if you want green power. Do you remember that? Well, that got turned into compulsory. And we did that when we enacted legislation called the RET, Renewable Energy Target, which means that by 2020, 20% of all electricity has to come from renewable energy sources.
Impossible.
In many cases, it already is, and that's in part why your bills have increased already. But the aim of Julia Gillard is to try and force all power to come from the most expensive source, which means that it is punishing the people and having you have a lower standard of living. I think it is quite significant that Germany is now building the biggest coal-fired power station in the world. That China is building coal-fired power stations every week. And here, the Gillard government has paid money to power stations which are fueled by coal to close them down. They want to close down the Hazelwood power station in Victoria, which supplies 25% of Victoria's power. Now, those of you who have been in third world countries and are familiar with the brownouts, when the power simply runs out and there just isn't any, will remember that that's the sort of future that this Prime Minister has for you. And we say that we are here in the Liberal and National parties to serve the people. We are here with policies where we want to see the people rich, not the government. Where we want to see free enterprise really work, and we want to see the workers have their standard of living rise and not be punished. We don't want to see rule by elites. We want to see the true parliamentary system working, and the only way that can happen before us to have an election. That is a good call. It is something that we want. It is something that we want. We can't force it, but we can keep the pressure up. And I can simply say to you all today that you have the commitment from me, from Tony Abbott, from my colleagues, that we will abolish that tax, that we will again restore the standard of living, that we will stop borrowing $100 million a day, that we will again have a government which is in the interest of the people, not for the oppression of the people. Thank you for listening to me today.